Did you ever stop and think about how many candies from the 1980s that seemed perfectly normal are now illegal? These sweet treats filled childhood memories with flavor, color, and excitement, yet carried hidden dangers nobody suspected. What toxic secrets were lurking inside those bright wrappers we trusted so completely? Red dye number 2 candies were everywhere in the 1980s, coloring everything from fruit punches to bright red lollipops with a petroleum-based compound called amaranth that nobody questioned. Children lined up at candy counters pointing at the reddest treats they could find, while parents handed over coins without a second thought about what made those colors so vivid. The dye had been used for decades, and manufacturers trusted it completely. Nobody imagined that the brilliant crimson making their favorite candies so appealing could be anything but harmless. But behind closed laboratory doors, researchers were discovering something troubling. Studies on rats showed connections between red dye number 2 and tumor growth that could not be ignored. When the FDA finally took action in 1976, banning amaranth from American food products, it sent shockwaves through the candy industry. Suddenly, the trusty red coloring that had defined countless childhood treats became contraband. Manufacturers scrambled to reformulate, but the damage to public trust had already begun. Looking back, it feels unsettling to realize how many bright red candies passed through small hands before anyone understood the risk. Candy cigarettes were the ultimate forbidden thrill packaged in the most innocent wrapper imaginable, sold right beside real tobacco products in every corner store and gas station during the 1980s. Children loved pretending to smoke these chalky sugar sticks, mimicking the adults they saw in movies, on television, and in their own living rooms. The packaging copied real cigarette brands so closely that a child could feel genuinely grown up while puffing pretend smoke into the cold winter air. Parents bought them without hesitation because candy was candy, and what harm could sugar possibly do? Nobody talked about the psychological conditioning happening with every fake drag, the way children were being trained to associate cigarettes with sweetness and fun. Health advocates eventually raised alarms about these products normalizing smoking behavior at a dangerously young age. Multiple countries moved to ban candy cigarettes entirely, removing them from shelves and prohibiting their sale to minors. Some American states followed with their own restrictions. Today, those innocent-looking packages represent a disturbing chapter in candy history, where marketing targeted children in ways we now recognize as harmful. Kinder Surprise eggs seemed like the most magical candy invention ever created when they appeared in European stores. A hollow chocolate shell hiding a tiny toy capsule that children could discover and assemble. The concept combined two of childhood's greatest loves into one irresistible package, and kids everywhere begged their parents to buy them. But American children would never legally experience that particular thrill, because the United States had banned these treats since 1938 under a law prohibiting non-nutritive objects embedded inside food products. The concern was simple and serious. Small children could bite into the chocolate, reach the plastic capsule, and choke before anyone realized what was happening. The FDA treated Kinder eggs as a genuine safety threat, issuing warnings to travelers who tried smuggling them across borders. Customs agents confiscated thousands of the eggs every year, sometimes issuing fines up to $2,500 per egg. The ban frustrated American parents who had enjoyed the treats abroad and wanted to share the experience with their own children. It felt strange that something so beloved worldwide remained contraband in the land of the free. Lucas acidified candy powder was the intensely sour Mexican treat that became a schoolyard sensation during the 1980s and 90s, passed between children who dared each other to withstand its tongue-scorching bite. The powder came in small containers that kids would pour directly onto their tongues, competing to see who could handle the most without wincing. The chili lime flavor was unlike anything American candy offered, and children from border states introduced their friends to this exotic import with evangelical enthusiasm. What nobody realized was that the traditional chili powder coating contained dangerous levels of lead. The contamination came from multiple sources, including the soil where peppers were grown, the equipment used during processing, and the storage containers that held ingredients. When the FDA finally tested these candies and discovered lead levels far exceeding safety limits, the recall was immediate and sweeping. Stores pulled Lucas products from shelves, and health officials warned parents to throw away any remaining candy. The beloved powder that had made so many taste buds tingle became a cautionary tale about contamination hiding in traditional recipes. Jelly Cup Mini Gel Candies were the colorful little cups of jiggly sweetness that children slurped down by the handful during the 1980s and 90s, not realizing that the texture they loved could turn deadly in seconds. These treats came in small plastic cups filled with konjac gel, a substance derived from the konjac plant that created an unusually firm, slippery consistency. Children loved squeezing the cups to pop the gel directly into their mouths, often swallowing the entire piece without chewing. The problem was that konjac gel did not dissolve like regular gelatin. When a piece lodged in a small throat, it stayed there, blocking airways in ways that made the Heimlich maneuver nearly useless. Deaths began accumulating across multiple countries, many involving young children who choked on these seemingly harmless treats. The FDA issued import alerts and warnings, and by 2001, the agency had effectively banned konjac gel candies from entering the United States. The sweet little cups that had been party favors and lunchbox treats became symbols of how texture could transform a treat into tragedy. Toxic waste. Nuclear sludge candy bars sounded dangerous because they were supposed to, marketed with radioactive symbols and edgy packaging that appealed to children who loved anything extreme. The cherry-flavored version became particularly popular, with its sour punch and rebellious branding, making kids feel like they were getting away with something forbidden. Nobody expected the name to prove prophetic in the worst possible way. In 2011, California health officials discovered that toxic waste nuclear sludge bars contained lead levels exceeding state safety standards. The contamination traced back to ingredients sourced from Pakistan, where quality controls had failed to catch the heavy metal presence. The recall was swift, pulling the cherry-flavored bars from shelves across the country. Parents who had laughed at the ironic branding suddenly found nothing funny about genuine toxicity hiding inside their children's favorite candy. The incident demonstrated how global supply chains could introduce dangers that domestic manufacturers never anticipated. The toxic waste brand survived, but the nuclear sludge bars carrying lead became a permanent stain on extreme candy history. Chaka Chaka chili lollipops represented the authentic taste of Mexican candy tradition, with their tangy tamarind coating and fiery chili dusting that made American taste buds curious and Mexican children nostalgic for flavors from home. These lollipops were passed between school children like treasured contraband, each one promising an intensity that regular American sweets could never match. The recipe had been perfected over generations, using techniques and ingredients that connected families to their cultural heritage. But those traditional methods carried risks that nobody anticipated. When health officials began testing imported Mexican candies for lead contamination, Chaka Chaka appeared on warning list after warning list. The lead came from the same sources affecting other chili candies, contaminated soil and equipment that introduced heavy metals during production. The FDA issued import alerts and pulled contaminated batches from American stores. For families who had grown up with these flavors, the news felt like a betrayal of something precious. A candy that had represented cultural connection became another casualty of contamination. Red dye. Number 3 maraschino cherries sat atop sundaes, floated in cocktails, and decorated countless desserts with their unnaturally bright red glow throughout the 1980s. Children loved fishing these sweet gems out of their drinks and ice cream, savoring the syrupy sweetness that made them taste nothing like real fruit. The dye responsible for that distinctive color was erythrocene, a synthetic compound that had been coloring foods since the early 20th century. Food manufacturers trusted it implicitly, using it in everything from candies to baked goods. But studies eventually linked erythrocene to thyroid problems in laboratory animals, raising concerns that had simmered for decades. The FDA considered banning the dye multiple times, yet it remained in American food products longer than many expected. Finally, in early 2025, regulators announced that red dye number 3 would be prohibited from food products. The announcement gave manufacturers time to reformulate, but it marked the end of an era. Those bright red cherries would never glow quite the same way again. Warheads. Super sour bubble gum pushed the boundaries of what human taste buds could tolerate, and children across the 1980s and 90s competed to prove their worthiness by enduring the extreme citric acid assault. The candy's marketing celebrated suffering, and kids wore their puckered faces like badges of honor. But the extreme acidity that made Warheads famous also made them dangerous in ways that took years to become clear. Repeated exposure to high concentrations of citric acid stripped protective layers from tongue tissue, causing painful sores and burning sensations that lasted long after the candy dissolved. Some children developed what amounted to chemical burns inside their mouths, with tissue damage visible on tongues that had simply enjoyed too much of a good thing. Dentists began warning parents about enamel erosion, and health advocates called for restrictions on just how sour candy could legally be. While the original Warheads remain available, formulations changed and warnings appeared, acknowledging that extreme sourness came with extreme consequences nobody had fully considered. Magic Ball chocolate toys were the original Nestle attempt to bring Kinder Egg magic to American children without triggering the federal ban on non-nutritive objects embedded in food. The concept seemed clever enough. A hollow chocolate ball with a small toy surprise inside, marketed to children who wanted that thrill of discovery. But the design failed to address the fundamental problem that had kept Kinder Eggs illegal for decades. Small children could still bite through the chocolate and encounter the toy before realizing it was not edible. Consumer advocates argued that the magic ball was simply repackaging a known choking hazard with different branding. Complaints mounted, and Nestle eventually discontinued the original product. The company later relaunched a reformulated version called Wonderball, replacing inedible toys with small candies that would dissolve harmlessly if accidentally swallowed. The original magic balls with their tiny plastic surprises became collector items, artifacts from a brief moment when a major candy company thought they could outsmart safety regulations. Vero elotes, chili lollipops shaped like tiny ears of corn, were one of the most distinctive Mexican candies to cross into American convenience stores during the 1980s. Children loved the novelty of sucking on something that looked like a miniature vegetable while tasting an explosion of chili, lime, and sweetness. The corn-shaped design made them stand out from ordinary lollipops, and kids would compare collections and trade flavors on school playgrounds. What seemed like harmless cultural exchange turned darker when health officials began testing these imported treats. Lead contamination showed up repeatedly in samples, traced to contaminated soil where peppers dried and equipment that introduced heavy metals during processing. The FDA issued multiple import alerts, pulling specific batches from shelves whenever testing revealed dangerous levels. Families who had grown up with these flavors were devastated to learn that something so familiar carried risks their parents never imagined. The corn-shaped candy that once symbolized cultural connection became another casualty of regulations designed to protect children from dangers hiding in plain sight. Nestle Wonderball, in its original edition, was the American attempt to capture the magic of Kinder Eggs without running afoul of federal choking hazard laws, though the first version failed spectacularly at that goal. These hollow chocolate spheres contain small plastic Disney figurines sealed inside, promising children the thrill of cracking open a sweet shell to discover a hidden prize. Critics quickly pointed out that the design shared the exact same problems that had kept Kinder Eggs banned for decades. Children could crack the chocolate and potentially swallow the plastic capsule before realizing anything was inside. Parental complaints and regulatory pressure mounted quickly after the product launched, and consumer advocacy groups demanded action. Nestle eventually reformulated the entire concept, replacing the plastic toys with small candy pieces that would dissolve harmlessly if accidentally swallowed. The original toy-filled version disappeared from shelves almost as quickly as it arrived, becoming a brief footnote in candy history. Today, those early Wonder Balls are collector items, Reminders that even major corporations can misjudge how seriously regulators take choking risks. Pelon Pelo Rico tamarind paste was one of the most addictive Mexican candies to appear in American border town stores during the 1980s, packaged in small plastic barrels that children would squeeze to push out a thick strand of sweet and sour paste. The name translated roughly to rich hair, describing the way the tamarind emerged in a thin rope that kids would wind around their fingers before eating. The flavor was unlike anything American candy offered, combining intense tartness with sweetness and a hint of chilly heat that lingered. Children became obsessed with the ritual of squeezing, twisting, and savoring every strand. When health officials began testing imported Mexican candies for lead contamination, Pelon Pelo Rico appeared repeatedly on warning lists. The contamination traced to traditional production methods, including tamarind paste stored in clay pots glazed with lead-based materials. The FDA flagged specific batches multiple times over the years, forcing retailers to pull product from shelves. Families who considered this candy a cherished connection to Mexican traditions were heartbroken to learn that something so beloved had been quietly poisoning the children who loved it most. Lollipipe candy smoking devices were exactly what they sounded like. Lollipops engineered to function as reusable pipes that could be used for smoking once the candy coating dissolved away. These products appeared in gas stations and novelty shops during the 1980s, marketed with winking suggestions that adults understood. The candy itself was colorful and sweet, but the hard sugar shell concealed a functional pipe bowl and stem that remained intact after the outer layer was consumed. Parents discovered their children buying these candies without understanding their true purpose, attracted by bright colors and flavors that seemed innocent. States began banning lollipipes one by one as concerns mounted about drug paraphernalia disguised as innocent candy. Connecticut police made headlines when they investigated local gas stations selling the products to minors. Washington State and Indiana enacted specific prohibitions. The products eventually disappeared from mainstream retail, though they occasionally surface in specialty shops, a strange artifact of an era when candy makers pushed every boundary they could find. Cyclamate-sweetened diet candies promised guilt-free indulgence throughout the 1960s, allowing weight-conscious Americans to enjoy sweets without the caloric burden of real sugar. The artificial sweetener had been discovered accidentally in 1937 when a researcher tasted tobacco contaminated with the compound and noticed its intense sweetness. By the late 60s, cyclamate appeared in everything from diet sodas to sugar-free hard candies and chewing gum. Manufacturers loved it because cyclamate was cheap, stable under heat, and blended well with other sweeteners. The market grew to over $1 billion annually. Then came the studies. Research in 1969 found that rats fed massive doses of cyclamate mixed with saccharin developed bladder tumors. The findings sparked immediate panic, and the government acted swiftly. By October 1969, cyclamate was banned from all American food products, wiping out an entire category of diet candies overnight. Subsequent research questioned whether the original studies were valid, but the ban remains in place today, making cyclamate one of the longest-standing prohibitions in American food history. Violet number 1. Dyed candies brought a distinctive purple hue to candy counters throughout the mid-20th century, coloring everything from hard candies to gumdrops with a shade that seemed almost magical under store lighting. The coal tar-derived dye had been used for decades, and manufacturers trusted it completely because it had passed earlier safety reviews without raising concerns. Children associated that particular shade of purple with grape-flavored treats and special occasion sweets that appeared at birthday parties and holiday gatherings. Nobody questioned the safety of something so familiar and so widely used in everyday products. But as testing methods improved, researchers began finding troubling connections between certain coal tar dyes and tumor development in laboratory animals. Violet number 1 fell under scrutiny when studies suggested links to cancerous growths. The FDA eventually delisted the dye, removing it from approved food additives and forcing manufacturers to reformulate products that had used that distinctive purple for generations. The color that once signified celebration became another casualty of evolving safety science. Orange number 1. Halloween candies were the bright, festive treats that filled trick-or-treat bags throughout the 1940s and early 50s, giving seasonal sweets their signature pumpkin-hued glow. Children loved how the candies seemed to capture the spirit of Halloween in their vivid coloring, and manufacturers used the dye liberally in everything from candy corn to orange-flavored hard candies. The coal tar-derived colorant had been approved for food use, and nobody questioned its safety during an era when synthetic additives seemed like scientific miracles. Then came Halloween, 1950. Children across the country began falling ill after consuming orange-colored candies, and investigators traced the outbreak to orange number 1. The dye had caused adverse reactions that sent children to hospitals and sparked immediate alarm among parents and health officials. The government banned orange number 1 shortly afterward, removing it from the list of approved food colorants. The incident became one of the earliest examples of a food additive being pulled after widespread illness, teaching manufacturers and regulators that bright colors could hide serious dangers nobody anticipated. Saffrol-flavored root beer candies captured the distinctive taste of old-fashioned sassafras in chewy treats that reminded older generations of homemade root beer brewed in backyard kettles. The compound came from sassafras bark, a natural flavoring used in American cooking since colonial times. Candy makers loved Saffrol because it delivered that authentic root beer taste that artificial flavorings could never quite match. Children who tasted these candies understood immediately why their grandparents spoke so fondly of sassafras tea and homemade sodas. The flavor seemed innocent, natural, and deeply connected to American culinary traditions. But laboratory studies eventually revealed something troubling hidden beneath that familiar taste. Saffrol caused liver damage in rats when consumed in large quantities, and researchers worried about cumulative effects in humans who consume the compound regularly over many years. The FDA banned Saffrol from food products in 1960, eliminating the authentic sassafras flavor from root beer candies and forcing manufacturers to develop artificial alternatives. Today, the distinctive taste that once defined American root beer exists only in memories. Brominated candy coating sprays gave confections a glossy sheen that made them irresistible under store lighting, and manufacturers in the 1980s used these products liberally to make their candies stand out on crowded shelves. The brominated vegetable oil in these coatings helped distribute flavoring evenly and prevented ingredients from separating, creating a smooth finish. Children were drawn to the shine without understanding what created it, and parents had no reason to question ingredients that seemed purely cosmetic. The candies looked premium, tasted delicious, and sold quickly. But bromine compounds began raising concerns as researchers studied their effects on the human body. Studies suggested that brominated oils could accumulate in fatty tissues, potentially affecting thyroid function and neurological development over time. European regulators moved first, restricting brominated vegetable oil while American authorities debated the evidence. The FDA eventually began limiting its use, and many manufacturers quietly reformulated their coatings to avoid the controversy. The glossy candies that once sparkled under fluorescent lights became duller but safer. Coumarin-flavored cinnamon candies delivered an intense, authentic taste that modern cinnamon treats rarely match because the compound responsible for that distinctive flavor is now restricted from American food products. Coumarin occurs naturally in cassia cinnamon bark, the variety most commonly sold in American grocery stores, and candy makers once concentrated it to create intensely flavored treats. Children loved how these candies burned with genuine cinnamon fire, far more potent than the mild versions available today. The compound gave Red Hots and similar candies their reputation for intensity. But European researchers discovered that coumarin caused liver damage in laboratory animals, particularly when consumed in concentrated doses found in flavored candies. Germany banned coumarin from food products first, and other countries followed as evidence accumulated. American manufacturers eventually reduced coumarin levels in cinnamon candies to meet stricter standards. The fiery cinnamon candies of the 1980s gradually became milder as formulations changed, leaving older generations wondering why modern versions never quite matched their childhood memories. Chloroform-flavored candies and lozenges once sat openly on candy shop shelves during the 19th and early 20th century, offering a sweet taste that carried a dangerous secret inside every piece. The compound that made these treats so distinctive was the same substance used to knock people unconscious in operating rooms and, as crime novels love to remind readers, to overpower victims with a soaked rag. Victory Fiv. Lozenges in Britain famously contained chloroform, ether, and chlorodyne, a mixture of cannabis and chloroform that gave the candies a reputation for having a kick like a mule. Children consumed them as casually as any other sweet, never realizing they were ingesting substances that could damage organs and impair consciousness. The sweet taste masked the chemical nature completely. Adults loved how the lozenges numbed sore throats and created a pleasant floating sensation. When researchers linked chloroform to cancer in laboratory animals, regulators acted decisively. The FDA banned chloroform from all food, drug, and cosmetic products in 1976, ending an era when anesthetics doubled as candy flavoring. Those old lozenges serve as reminders that sweetness once covered dangers nobody questioned. Dulce de leche candies imported from Mexico carried the rich caramel flavor that generations of families had trusted as a taste of home and tradition. These golden brown treats appeared in border town shops and specialty groceries throughout the 1980s, wrapped in colorful packaging that promised authentic sweetness. Children loved the creamy texture and deep caramel taste that American candies rarely matched. Families bought them in bulk, sharing them at celebrations and packing them into lunchboxes. What nobody suspected was that some imported dulce de leche products carried lead contamination from traditional cooking methods. Copper and clay vessels used to simmer the caramel sometimes leached heavy metals into batches. The FDA issued import alerts on multiple occasions, flagging specific brands and pulling products from shelves when testing revealed dangerous lead levels. Families who had considered these candies a cherished connection to their heritage were devastated to discover the risks. The sweet tradition that had passed between generations became another casualty of contamination hiding inside recipes nobody thought to question. Tartrazine-dyed candies filled candy aisles with brilliant lemon yellow hues throughout the 1980s, coloring everything from gummy bears to hard candies with a shade so bright it seemed to glow under fluorescent store lighting. Children reached for the yellowest treats instinctively, drawn to colors that promised intense flavor and fun. Manufacturers loved Tartrazine because it was cheap, stable, and produced consistent results batch after batch. The dye appeared in sodas, cereals, chips, and countless candies that became staples of childhood snacking. But studies began linking Tartrazine to hyperactivity in children, sparking debates that continue today. European regulators required warning labels on products containing the dye, alerting parents that the contents might affect activity and attention. Austria and Norway banned it entirely. American regulators moved slower, but by 2025, the FDA announced plans to phase out Tartrazine and other petroleum-based dyes from the food supply. The brilliant yellow that once meant fun and flavor now carries warnings that would have shocked families who never imagined candy colors could affect behavior. Fruit-flavored laxative candies were marketed directly to children during the 1970s and 80s, promising gentle relief in doses that tasted like treats rather than medicine. The chocolate squares and fruity chews looked almost identical to regular candy, packaged in cheerful wrappers that made them appealing to young eyes. Parents kept them in medicine cabinets alongside vitamins, trusting that child-friendly flavors would make necessary doses easier to administer. What manufacturers underestimated was how much children would want to eat them unsupervised. Emergency rooms began reporting cases of children who had consumed entire packages, attracted by flavors designed to mask the medicinal purpose. The overdoses caused severe cramping, dangerous dehydration, and electrolyte imbalances that required hospital treatment. Health advocates demanded reforms, pushing for packaging that looked less like candy. Regulations tightened, child-proof caps became mandatory, and formulations changed. The fruit-flavored laxatives that once looked like treats now carry stern warnings and bitter additives designed to prevent the appeal that originally made them marketable. Lead-wrapped tamarind ball candies represented one of the most disturbing examples of traditional packaging turning toxic in ways nobody anticipated. These small round treats were popular in Mexican candy shops for generations, wrapped in thin metallic foil that kept the sticky tamarind paste fresh and easy to handle. Children unwrapped dozens of these candies throughout their childhoods, touching the foil repeatedly before putting the sweet and sour balls directly into their mouths. The tradition seemed harmless, even charming in its simplicity. But the metallic wrappers on some products contained lead, a heavy metal that transferred to small fingers with every unwrapping and accumulated in young bodies over years of casual consumption. Health officials traced elevated blood lead levels in children back to these innocent-looking candies, prompting urgent recalls and import bans. The FDA flagged multiple brands, and public health campaigns warned families about the hidden danger in their favorite traditional treats. For communities that had trusted these candies for generations, the discovery felt like a betrayal of something sacred, proof that even the most beloved traditions could carry risks nobody saw coming. Canned meats preserved in nitrate salts looked like pure perfection. The color was bright pink, the flavor smoky, and the shelf life impressive. Housewives of the 1950s trusted them completely, serving slices of corned beef, deviled ham, and luncheon loaf without a second thought. It seemed like progress in a can, modern science keeping dinner safe and pretty. But what scientists would later discover about nitrates changed everything. When heated, these salts created nitrosamines, compounds linked to cancer and heart disease. That beautiful pink hue came at a dangerous cost. Even after the first warnings, it took years for consumers to believe that something so familiar could be deadly. People argued it was overblown, calling it just another scare. But soon, the facts became impossible to ignore. Those rosy slices were proof that sometimes color itself can lie. Doctors began warning families that the same food they fed their children could be silently poisoning them. By the time regulations caught up, generations had already grown up on nitrate-packed meat. It was a harsh lesson. Beauty in food can be deadly if you do not ask what makes it shine. What had once been the color of convenience turned into the warning color of caution. Back in the 1970s, a strange panic swept the candy aisle, the disappearance of red M&Ms. The culprit was red dye number 2, a synthetic coloring agent suspected of being carcinogenic. Mars pulled the red candies entirely, even though the specific dye was never used in M&Ms to begin with. Still, perception was stronger than fact. The empty red spaces in the bag made the other colors feel lonelier, like a rainbow missing its heart. Parents whispered warnings while kids traded rumors about the candy that could supposedly kill you. For almost a decade, the world's favorite chocolate candy had no red pieces. Kids traded theories on playgrounds and stared at colorless handfuls, wondering what was so dangerous about red. When red M&Ms finally returned with a new formula, it felt like a national celebration. People did not just get a color back, they got a piece of the past restored. It is funny how something so small could symbolize trust, fear, and nostalgia all at once. Today, that red candy means something different. It is a tiny reminder of how our food and our fears often share the same shade. Chlorofluorocarbon-propelled whipped cream canisters sat behind fast food counters throughout the 1970s, shooting fluffy white peaks onto sundaes and pies with a satisfying hiss. The propellant inside those metal cans worked perfectly, creating light and airy topping that held its shape beautifully. Workers pressed the nozzle dozens of times per shift, releasing tiny bursts of gas that drifted into kitchen air and eventually into the atmosphere. Nobody worried about what happened after the cream landed on the dessert. The cans were convenient, reliable, and everywhere. But chlorofluorocarbons were silently destroying the ozone layer, creating a global environmental crisis that scientists were only beginning to understand. When the connection became clear, regulators moved aggressively to ban CFCs from consumer products, including the whipped cream dispensers that had become standard equipment in every fast food dessert station. Restaurants switched to alternative propellants, and the familiar hiss changed slightly in ways most customers never noticed. Today, those old CFC canisters represent a strange intersection of innocent dessert toppings and planetary damage. Full-fat cheese smothering nachos and pizza was one of the great pleasures of 80s school lunches, thick orange layers that stretched and pulled with every bite. Pizza day meant rectangles of dough buried under blankets of melted cheese glistening under heat lamps, while nacho day brought mountains of chips covered in warm cheese sauce dripping from every edge. Kids devoured these meals without a thought about fat content or dietary consequences. Cheese was simply delicious, a food group unto itself that made everything taste better. Schools served it generously because children actually ate their lunches when cheese was involved, solving the problem of wasted food and hungry afternoon students. The cheese came from massive blocks or industrial bags, measured by the handful rather than the ounce. But full-fat dairy carried more saturated fat than nutritionists eventually deemed acceptable for growing children. When federal guidelines restricted the types of cheese schools could serve, cafeterias switched to reduced fat versions that melted differently and tasted less rich. Students today eat pizza and nachos that look similar but lack the indulgent quality that made those meals legendary. Brominated vegetable oil floated invisibly inside the citrus-flavored sodas served at fast food fountains during the 1970s, keeping the fruity flavoring evenly distributed instead of separating. The chemical worked so well that beverage companies used it without hesitation, and customers gulped down orange and lemon-lime drinks by the gallon. Kids ordered refills constantly, never imagining that each sip contained a flame-retardant compound repurposed for the food industry. The drinks tasted bright, refreshing, and perfectly normal. Parents handed them to children at birthday parties and during long summer afternoons spent at plastic tables. But brominated vegetable oil accumulates in fatty tissue, and researchers eventually linked it to thyroid problems and neurological issues. When the evidence mounted, regulators began restricting its use, and major beverage companies quietly reformulated their recipes. Today, most citrus sodas no longer contain the compound, though it took far longer than it should have for the industry to change. Those fizzy orange drinks of the 70s carried a hidden ingredient that nobody thought to question. There was a time when buying imported cheese felt like sophistication itself. In the 1970s, raw milk cheeses, creamy, tangy, and full of character, became the mark of a true gourmet. They were made by hand, aged in cool cellars, and packed with rich, earthy flavor that pasteurized versions could never match. But the same bacteria that gave them depth also brought danger. Listeria, Salmonella, and E. coli lurked in the unpasteurized milk, invisible threats wrapped in golden wax. The Food and Drug Administration drew a line. Any cheese made from raw milk must be aged at least 60 days before sale to allow harmful bacteria to die off. That single rule shut the door on countless beloved imports. Cheeses from France, Italy, and Switzerland vanished from American markets, replaced by safer, blander versions. For many, it felt like losing a link to old-world culture, a trade of flavor for security. Even today, food lovers debate the rule, whether it protects us or just keeps us from tasting something truly real. But for those who remember that first bite of brie so soft it nearly melted on the tongue, the ban marked more than a change in law. It marked the end of an era when danger could still taste divine. Sodium benzoate soft drinks in metal cans were the silent experiment no one asked for. The preservative sodium benzoate was widely used to keep sodas fresh and prevent spoilage. It seemed harmless. But when manufacturers began packaging those sodas in aluminum cans, they created an accidental chemistry experiment. The acid in the soda reacted with both the metal and the preservative, forming trace amounts of benzene, a known carcinogen. The reaction was slow and invisible, but over time it turned sealed cans into ticking health hazards. Consumers had no idea. The drinks tasted the same, fizzy and bright, a staple at picnics and drive-ins. When scientists finally uncovered the problem in the 1980s, it was a public relations nightmare. Companies rushed to change formulas, remove sodium benzoate, and test for safety. But the damage to trust had already been done. It was another case of innovation outpacing caution, of chemistry being used before it was fully understood. The soda cans of the 1950s represented the excitement of a new age, but also its recklessness. They glimmered with promise, even as they carried a danger that no one could see. And just like that, something as innocent as a soft drink became another entry in the long list of modern mistakes. Mechanically separated poultry filled the chicken nuggets and patties served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, processed through machines that stripped every usable bit of meat from bones under high pressure. The result was a pink slurry that could be shaped, breaded, and fried into forms that children eagerly devoured without asking what was inside. Parents trusted the familiar shapes and golden coating, never imagining the industrial process that created them. The nuggets were cheap, consistent, and perfectly designed for small hands and picky eaters. But mechanically separated meat included tissues and cartilage that would never appear in traditional cuts, and the process raised questions about what exactly counted as chicken. When consumers learned how their favorite nuggets were made, the backlash was swift. Regulators stepped in with labeling requirements, forcing manufacturers to reformulate or face consumer rejection. Today, many chains advertise whole muscle meat in their chicken products, a direct response to the disgust that followed revelations about the pink paste that once defined fast food chicken. Pink slime meat fillers in ground beef were one of the cafeteria secrets that nobody talked about because nobody even knew they existed. The hamburgers and taco meat that children ate throughout the 1980s contained something called lean, finely textured beef, a product made from scraps and trimmings, spun in centrifuges and treated with ammonia to kill bacteria. It stretched the meat supply, lowered costs, and allowed schools to serve more students with smaller budgets. Kids bit into burgers believing they were eating real ground beef, never imagining that a portion came from processed leftovers that barely resembled meat. The texture blended in perfectly, masked by ketchup, mustard, and whatever else children piled on top. For years, this filler moved through school kitchens without question. But when journalists and food safety advocates exposed the practice, the public reaction was fierce. Parents demanded transparency, regulators tightened requirements, and pink slime was eventually banned from school cafeterias nationwide. Today, ground beef served to students must meet stricter standards that leave no room for the mystery fillers that once stretched every serving. Yoo-hoo was a drink built on nostalgia long before nostalgia became a trend. Its chocolatey flavor was a childhood staple, the kind of sweet, slightly watery treat that made you feel like everything was simpler back then. But the early formula carried a secret: sodium benzoate levels that could become unsafe under heat or improper storage. When the truth came out, it shocked people who had grown up with that yellow bottle as part of their lives. Yoo-hoo wasn't just a drink, it was a summer memory, a lunchbox companion, a reward after mowing the lawn. To learn it could spoil so easily felt like finding out your childhood friend had a dark side. In hot delivery trucks and sunlit store displays, the preservative sometimes reacted to spoil the drink faster than expected. The company faced growing scrutiny, and regulators demanded changes. By the time Yoo-hoo was reformulated, the charm of its golden age had faded a little. Still, for many who grew up in the 50s through the 80s, that yellow bottle remains a symbol of innocence, when a chilled chocolate drink on a summer afternoon could make the whole world feel right again. Cottage cheese with rennet from calf stomach was once a wholesome staple that carried a darker story. Back in the 1950s, no one questioned where their food came from or what went into it. The process sounded simple enough: curdle milk, strain it, and add rennet to thicken the texture. But rennet wasn't just an ingredient. It came from the inner lining of a young calf's stomach, an enzyme extracted during slaughter. To most consumers, it was invisible, an unseen part of the dairy world. For decades, people spooned cottage cheese onto fruit, salads, and toast without realizing the cost behind its creamy texture. When animal rights movements gained traction in the 1970s, rennet production came under fire. It wasn't just the ethics, it was also the contamination risks. Using animal tissue carried the danger of bacteria and disease, especially before stricter processing standards existed. Eventually, scientists developed microbial and plant-based alternatives, and the old method faded quietly into history. Modern cottage cheese tastes the same, but it no longer carries that hidden story of sacrifice. For anyone who remembers the real thing, there's a bittersweet truth in knowing that the innocent foods of the past were often anything but. Monosodium glutamate in kids' meal promotions was one of the food industry's favorite tricks during the 1970s, boosting flavor in ways that made children beg for more. Fast food chains loaded chicken nuggets, flavored fries, and dipping sauces with MSG because it made everything taste richer, saltier, and almost addictive. Parents had no idea that the ingredient their children craved was specifically engineered to trigger intense flavor responses that natural foods could not match. The meals came with toys, cartoons, and colorful packaging that made the whole experience feel innocent and fun. Kids ate eagerly, asking for seconds, while MSG quietly amplified every bite. When researchers began reporting headaches, flushing, and other reactions linked to high MSG consumption, public concern grew rapidly. Parents started reading labels, demanding answers, and questioning what exactly was in those happy little boxes. Regulatory pressure mounted, and many chains quietly reduced or removed MSG from their most child-focused offerings. Today, the additive is still legal but heavily scrutinized, and its presence in kids' meals has become far more controversial than anyone imagined decades ago. Those shiny silver balls that once sparkled on Christmas cookies were more than decoration. They were tradition. Every family had them, tucked away in a jar beside colored sprinkles. They were called silver dragées, tiny metallic orbs that made cakes and wedding desserts shimmer like jewelry. In the glow of candlelight or under frosting, they looked almost too beautiful to eat. And, as it turned out, they were. The Food and Drug Administration banned them after discovering the metallic coating contained real silver, which is not considered edible. For years, bakers had sprinkled actual metal onto desserts without realizing the potential health risk. It was not toxic in small amounts, but the government could not take chances. By the early 2000s, the silver balls disappeared from American stores, relegated to "for decoration only" status. Still, people continued using them secretly, claiming no holiday cookie looked complete without that touch of sparkle. They became a quiet act of nostalgia, a bit of rebellion wrapped in frosting. Even now, older recipe books list them casually, as though nothing ever changed. There was magic in those metallic sweets, a reminder that sometimes beauty and danger can share the same shine, and that not everything meant for the eye should ever meet the tongue. Those cafeteria meals shaped our childhoods, filling trays with foods we trusted completely. So what changed so drastically that the lunches we loved are now forbidden? Whole milk served in every carton was the unquestioned standard in school cafeterias throughout the 1980s, sitting in metal coolers beside the lunch line like tiny white soldiers waiting to be chosen. Kids grabbed them without thinking, peeling back the paper spout and drinking deeply while chatting with friends. Parents believed milk was simply good for growing bodies, and nobody questioned whether the fat content mattered. The creamy richness felt like part of the meal itself, something that washed down the heaviest cafeteria foods and left a satisfying film on the lips. Teachers encouraged it, nurses praised it, and lunch ladies handed out extras to anyone who asked. But when federal nutrition guidelines changed, whole milk became a target almost overnight. Studies linked full-fat dairy in childhood to weight concerns that worried health officials nationwide. Regulators stepped in and declared that only skim or 1% milk could be offered to students in public schools. The cartons stayed the same, but the contents grew thinner and far less satisfying to those who remembered how milk used to taste. Coca-Cola with real coca extract was one of those open secrets everyone knew but no one mentioned. The original formula, created decades earlier, contained trace amounts of coca leaf, the same plant used to make cocaine. By the 1950s, the company claimed to have removed it, but in some rural bottling plants, the old recipe still found its way into production. It gave the soda a unique kick, a kind of energy that people swore by. No one called it addiction back then. They just said it helped them get through the day. Coca-Cola was more than a drink. It was America's tonic, its pick-me-up, its symbol of modern energy. But once the truth became impossible to ignore, Coca-Cola quietly changed its process for good. What was left was still iconic, but a little less wild, a little more safe. It's funny to think that one of the most innocent brands in American history was once powered by something so forbidden. Then there were Olestra chips, the so-called miracle snack of the 90s. They promised all the flavor of regular potato chips with none of the fat. For families trying to eat healthier, that was a dream come true. Bags of these chips filled grocery aisles with big labels that said fat-free and guilt-free. But the dream turned sour fast. People discovered that Olestra did not just remove fat, it also removed dignity. It blocked the body from absorbing essential vitamins and caused severe digestive distress. The stories spread fast, and suddenly the chips became the punchline of every late-night talk show. What started as a scientific breakthrough ended as a national embarrassment. Within a few years, Olestra was quietly pulled from shelves, never to return. It left behind a strange lesson about how far we are willing to go to keep the foods we love while pretending to make them better for us. Some things, it seems, were meant to stay full of fat and full of flavor. Styrofoam clamshell containers were the unmistakable packaging of fast food in the 1970s, snapping shut with a satisfying click that told you dinner was ready to go. Every burger, every fish sandwich, and every pile of hot nuggets came nestled inside that white foam shell, keeping food warm while families drove home or ate in parking lots with the windows rolled down. Kids loved pressing their thumbs into the material and watching the dents stay put, not realizing they were handling something that would never break down. The containers were cheap to produce, incredibly effective at insulation, and everywhere you looked. But styrofoam leached chemicals into hot food, especially when grease and heat combined inside that sealed environment. Studies later revealed that styrene, a compound in the foam, carried real health risks with prolonged exposure. Environmental concerns mounted as landfills overflowed with containers that refused to decompose. Cities began banning them one by one, and today most major chains have abandoned styrofoam entirely. That familiar snap of a clamshell closing is now a sound from a different era, one where convenience outweighed consequences. Butter-flavored margarine was a 1950s wonder, spreadable, cheap, and promoted as a heart-healthy alternative to butter. Housewives embraced it as the modern choice, the sign of progress in every kitchen. Its golden color and smooth texture promised indulgence without guilt. It was advertised in bright magazines beside smiling families and spotless kitchens, the perfect picture of American prosperity. Scientists and companies alike told the public it was the smarter fat, a scientific marvel that separated them from the old-fashioned ways of their parents. But science back then cared more about selling innovation than testing its safety. The secret behind its miracle formula was trans fats, the industrial oils hydrogenated to stay solid at room temperature. For decades, Americans slathered their toast and fried their eggs in it, believing they were doing their hearts a favor. Then the studies came, and the truth was hard to swallow. Trans fats were worse than the butter they replaced, clogging arteries and shortening lives. By the time it was banned, it had already shaped the diet of a generation. Butter-flavored margarine was more than a product. It was a lie sold with a smile. Sodium nitrite at unregulated levels preserved the bacon, ham, and deli meats served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, keeping everything pink, fresh-looking, and shelf-stable far longer than nature intended. The preservative prevented bacterial growth and gave cured meats that appetizing color customers expected, but nobody monitored how much was being used. Restaurants piled bacon onto burgers, stuffed sandwiches with processed ham, and served breakfast platters loaded with cured meats that contained concentrations now considered dangerous. Families ate without hesitation, trusting that the food industry knew what it was doing. But sodium nitrite forms compounds called nitrosamines when heated or digested, and those compounds have been linked to increased cancer risk. Once researchers documented the connection, regulators stepped in with strict limits on how much nitrite could be added to any food product. The freewheeling days of unmeasured preservatives ended, replaced by careful formulations and mandatory labeling. Today, the bacon on your breakfast sandwich contains a fraction of what it once did, though the memory of those heavily preserved meats lingers. Sizzlin was supposed to be the future of breakfast. Marketed in the 1970s as better than bacon, it promised the same smoky flavor with less fat and cholesterol. Commercials showed smiling families flipping perfect strips on the stove, proud to be eating healthier. But Sizzlin was not exactly what it claimed. It was a mix of pork and beef blended with artificial flavorings and fillers that barely qualified as real meat. Over time, new labeling laws and stricter regulations revealed that its marketing had been misleading. The product was pulled and Sizzlin quietly faded away. For those who remember it, the name still carries a strange nostalgia, half comfort, half caution. It was a glimpse into an era when we trusted packaging more than ingredients and believed that science could reinvent even bacon. Some memories sizzle out, others linger just long enough to remind us how good intentions can sometimes turn synthetic. Deep-fried fish sticks made with trans fats were a cafeteria treasure that arrived every Friday like clockwork, golden and crispy and practically glowing under the fluorescent lights. Kids lined up eagerly because Fish Stick Day meant something special, a break from the usual rotation that felt almost celebratory. The breading crackled with each bite, giving way to flaky white fish that tasted vaguely of the ocean and heavily of the deep fryer. What nobody realized was that those fryers bubbled with partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, a cooking fat that made everything crispier and quietly dangerous. Lunch ladies loaded baskets and lowered them into shimmering pools of oil reused all week, each batch absorbing more trans fats that scientists would later connect to heart disease. Parents assumed fried fish was still healthy, still a reasonable choice for growing children. Schools kept serving them because the cost was low and the kids kept eating. But when the truth about trans fats finally surfaced, regulators moved fast. Today, partially hydrogenated oils are completely banned from school kitchens, and the fish sticks that remain taste different, lacking the signature crunch of the forbidden fats. Saccharin packets without cancer warning labels sat in small glass dispensers on every fast food table during the early 1970s, offered freely to customers who wanted sweetness without sugar. Dieters shook the little pink packets into their coffee and iced tea, believing they had found a guilt-free solution to their cravings. The artificial sweetener had been around for decades, trusted by millions, and nobody imagined that regulators were about to require warning labels on every package. When studies suggested a possible link to bladder cancer in laboratory animals, the government mandated labels that shocked consumers. Suddenly, something that felt harmless came with fine print that made people pause before tearing open the packet. Fast food restaurants continued offering saccharin, but customers now faced an uncomfortable choice with every cup of coffee. The warning labels remained in place for years, creating confusion around a sweetener that many still use daily. Today, the labels are gone after further research softened the concerns. But the memory of that regulatory whiplash lingers as a reminder that approved additives can fall under sudden suspicion. Raw milk was once the pride of the American farm, bottled straight from the source and sold in glass jars. People swore it tasted better, richer, creamier, and somehow more real. In the 1950s, it was still common to see it on grocery shelves, untouched by modern processing. But beneath the nostalgia was danger. Without pasteurization, raw milk carried bacteria that caused tuberculosis, salmonella, and other deadly diseases. Rural families, especially in dairy states, considered pasteurization unnecessary city talk. They trusted their cows, their neighbors, and the land itself. Unfortunately, nature is not as kind as nostalgia remembers. It hides danger even in the things we love most. Families believed they were drinking nature's perfect food, not knowing that it sometimes carried the very thing that made them sick. Eventually, stricter food laws swept across the country, forcing dairies to heat-treat every drop before it hit the store. Raw milk became illegal in most states, a symbol of both freedom lost and safety gained. To some, it was government overreach. To others, it was salvation. Either way, the days of milk straight from the cow were gone for good. There was once a time when you could buy supersized McDonald's items not just in restaurants, but frozen in grocery stores. Burgers, fries, and breakfast sandwiches packaged for the home promised that same fast food flavor anytime, anywhere. It was a symbol of convenience, of America's unstoppable appetite for more. The frozen line sold well at first, feeding late-night cravings and quick dinners. But soon, the tide began to turn. Documentaries and health advocates exposed the growing obesity crisis, linking it to portion sizes and processed foods. The phrase supersize became a public target, a warning instead of a badge of indulgence. Laws requiring calorie disclosures and nutritional transparency pushed McDonald's to retire the branding entirely. Shelves that once held those frozen giants went empty, replaced by smaller, healthier options. For many, it marked the end of an era, a time when fast food felt fun, not frightening. Yet there is something undeniably nostalgic about those oversized meals, wrapped in red and gold packaging that promised happiness in minutes. They were part of a bigger cultural story, one about convenience, excess, and the simple joy of biting into something you knew you should not. And maybe, deep down, that is why people still miss them, not for the taste, but for the freedom they once represented. Before you go, tell us in the comments which banned candy shocked you most. Tap like if this sweet and sour trip through forbidden flavors brought back memories, and subscribe so you never miss another taste of hidden history.